Welcome back to the show. We are talking to Darren Nelson, who is with Liberty Works and is also an author of a new book about regulation. Darren, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are out with a new book, The 10 Principles of Regulation. Can you tell us what your book specifically is about and what made you decide to write it?
Well, it's exactly what the title says. It sets out 10 principles on good regulation reform. And what inspired me is I've been working in the field of government regulation for about 20 years. So I've certainly learned a thing or two over that time period.
One of the things that you point out in your book is that regulation isn't the best way to unleash an economy. Can you tell us what other principles you talk about in your book and what you would view as some of the biggest takeaways that you hoped your readers will pull away from what you wrote?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd love people to remember, if they could, is a phrase called Baptists and Bootleggers. And what that refers to, it comes from the 1920s and alcohol prohibition. And the people who were behind getting alcohol prohibited were Christian Baptists and alcohol bootleggers. And what makes that interesting for today, and pretty much for all time periods regarding regulation, is there's always those two groups of people behind any regulation. The Baptist refers to the true believers in a concept, say climate change, and the bootleggers are the people who get the financial benefit from it. In the case of climate change, that would be bankers and solar industry people and all sorts.
One of the things that we have seen here in the United States with President Trump now as president is that regulation has definitely been slashed across the board, but that has caused many people to be upset with him because they think regulation is good to hold people accountable. For example, they think regulation in the energy and environment is good because it would prevent pollution. Do you agree that regulation or reducing regulation can be harmful for things like the environment?
I would disagree in this way. The economy is always regulated. It's a question of who is regulating it. So in my opinion as an economist and as a person who's just seen how regulations just tend not to work in practice, the best regulator is competition. So that's competition between consumers, competition between businesses, competition between investors. That's true regulation that actually works.
One final question for you, Darren. How do you think that the Australian government, who just had some big sweeping changes there, how do you think they are doing when it comes to regulation, and what would you like to see Australia do more of to reduce regulation?
Australia has a habit, good and bad, to simply copy what America does. So in the good times, they copied the Reagan reforms. In the bad times, they copied the Obama reforms. So I just simply like them to copy what the Trump administration is doing. They're absolute world leaders when it comes to slashing regulations. In fact, they've done even more than the Reagan administration has done.
All right, Darren, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.